imagine you'll be tuned in later on this morning when that hearing begins. Bill, what would you like to hear?
Well, I think that he's already foreshadowed what he's going to say. The Senate is worried about compromising the Fed's independence, and that's probably the only thing that could hang up this confirmation hearing. And he's already stated in his opening remarks that he's going to honor that. Obviously, what that means in practice once you're in the Federal Reserve what remains to be seen. But he's going to say the right things, and I expect him to get confirmed.
Bill, I imagine that you're very focused on Fed independence, and I understand why. But when you look at financial markets, we haven't seen a major de-anchoring of inflation expectations. This hasn't showed up in a dramatic fashion. Do you see anything to be concerned about?
Well, I think that what President Trump is trying to do is unprecedented, trying to fire a sitting Federal Reserve governor. Whether that ultimately leads to majority control of the Board of Governors, and then what does the Board of Governors do with that majority control? People have speculated that they could make decisions about the renewal of the Federal Reserve Bank president's terms when they come up in February of next year. But I think, we don't really know where this is going to go. I think the effort, though, is unprecedented. So I think you have to take it seriously. I think at this point, markets are still pretty comfortable about this. I think probably a little too comfortable, given the fact that the president is trying so hard to influence monetary policy. But how this plays out, there's a long way to go.
Bill, though, when it comes to what's going on in terms of potentially having the reinstatement of the regional presidents, that would mean that Governors Waller and Bowman would need to sign up for that. You know these individuals. Do you think that's something they'd be interested in doing?
Well, I think I think you got it exactly right. You could have 4 people that were Trump appointees on the Board of Governors, but not all 4 might not agree to go so far as start to really change the composition of the Federal Open Market Committee by not reappointing presidents. So I think and I think that's one reason why people are pretty optimistic that this worst case scenario in terms of Fed independence is not going to happen. That said, we're already seeing actions that are unprecedented, and that's not the only thing that the president potentially could do to undercut Fed independence. So the very efforts that he's making, I think one has to take it seriously, because the process in the game isn't over yet.
Well, when you look at this unprecedented action, I think you're talking about what's going on with Governor Lisa Cook. But what happens if she is charged basically with mortgage fraud? Wouldn't that be for cause for the president to say she doesn't have the trust in the public?
Well, I think there's 2 issues here. The first issue is what does for cause mean in terms of, can you dismiss someone for cause unrelated to their actual performance on the job? Most people have interpreted for cause meaning negligence and gross incompetence, malfeasance in the execution of your job. The second issue, though, with Lisa Cook's issue is if she were to be found guilty, the question is, even if the president doesn't have the authority to remove her, is it really tenable for her to stay on the Fed at that point? So I think there's also the question about, could she stay on the Fed if she was found guilty, even if the president was found to not have the authority to fire her?
You sit on the Bretton Woods Committee, Bill, and I really am trying to think more broadly here about what Fed independence means right now, given the fact that the United States has a huge deficit, and increasingly it is more pegged to Fed policy than ever before as it gets issued increasingly at shorter denominations. What does Fed independence mean when these are appointed individuals with inherent views on exactly how hot the economy should run and what the compromise should be when it comes to how quickly to bring down inflation to 2%?
So the way I would interpret Fed independence is it doesn't mean the Fed can do whatever it wants. The Fed has to basically follow the guidance of Congress in terms of its objectives. And Congress has said the objectives for the Fed are maximum sustainable employment and price stability. So those are the objectives. What Fed independence means is the Federal Reserve should be able to conduct monetary policy independent of political pressure to achieve those objectives. And the problem with, compromising the central bank's independence is that the central bank loses credibility. People start to ask the question, is the Fed cutting rates because that's the right thing to do, or is the Fed cutting rates because they're under political pressure? Obviously, the election cycle plays into the president's calculations, does not play into the Federal Reserve's calculations. And one reason why central bank independence has become very prevalent around the world is it leads to better economic outcomes. It allows the central bank to take the longer view, not to overstimulate the economy and run up through elections, and then not have to slam on the brakes after the election when inflation actually starts to be realized. So Fed independence leads to better economic outcomes, and that's why it's got broad support around the world.